Expendables 2, obviously the first movie was such a tremendous success, so we could have expected this to come. But when Stallone approached you about it, what were the directives? Were they bigger and badder, or what was that conversation like?
You know, it was going to be, from the onset, you know, I think bigger and badder was something that seemed to make sense, but really, as they started to film and as the footage came back, it was more true than we ever thought, because it was in every direction, where you think there's, you when you hear people say things like, oh, there's, this movie has everything, or it's got something for everything, you kind of think, But on this one, it actually is more dramatic, because you have, the stakes are completely raised. You have one of the Expendables who dies, which is kind of, so it's more serious, but at the same time it's way more funny too in the lighter moments. Like, it's heavier and lighter. And then the action sequences are just bigger, and you have, you know, a bigger cast, and it's just a better ride overall. More dramatic, but also more fun. It's funnier, but it's got more action, and it is one of those, okay, well, somehow they pulled off making a movie that I think was better in every aspect. So for the music, it was just like, you know, follow the leader, you know. It was something where we wanted to definitely tip our hat to the first movie, but at the same time, why not, you know, have a little bit of fun with the rest of it, especially the fact that we have an arch villain now. We have a Darth Vader in the movie, it's Van Damme's character, and really, if you think about it, in the first one, it was kind of there wasn't a firm singular bad guy. It was kind of diffused. So I didn't really. So this is my chance to do that kind of thing, to do you know, a true villain theme, and then also the fact that there's like kind of like a lot more room to do kind of this noble thematic type of music for the fallen hero guy, you know. So I don't know. It's just there's a lot more room to maneuver, and there's kind of there are moments for every tone of scoring really in this film.
Well, that's a big reason why I was so impressed by it, because I think we see this in superhero movies many times, is that they have too many characters,
right?
And it just feels too packed. It feels like one storyline too much. But in this film, I mean, you're filled to the brim with nothing but icons, action icons, but you don't feel like anything's missing, or the film suffers in any way.
I know. You would think there's films in the past that, especially like in the 70s, there'd be sometimes you'd have like a comedy or a disaster movie, and you would have, from the poster where he has the poster and then about 5,000 little square pictures at the bottom of every movie star, and it kind of would get watered down. I think in this one, somehow they pulled it off, maybe just because of who they are as well. Like, I think it's a good fortune that these characters bring it's almost like they're playing themselves. Like, you didn't have to have tremendous backstory in each one, because Schwarzenegger shows up and he's doing his Schwarzenegger thing. He is Arnold from, the 80s and 90s. And you got Stallone, we know his character from the past movie, and Statham from the past movie and all that. But then Chuck Norris shows up, and he is not Chuck Norris playing someone, he is like the legend of Chuck Norris, you know what I mean? The guy that, has all those memes about him and how, all the things about how badass he is. He just kind of brings that to the screen, and so it's like, and then Bruce Willis and Van Damme and all these guys are kind of, they're reflections on the kind of an amalgam of their characters that they were, but now winking a little bit.
Right.
I think that's no more evident than like Dolph Lundgren's character, who is basically, who I think is one of the funniest people in the entire movie, which is kind of like, the retired and too heavy of a drinker Ivan Drago that, is kind of bummed out that he can't like pick up on girls as well as he used to, and that's like kind of his character. He's grumpy, and like you just love, like, to me, I loved his character. I just thought he was so funny, And so I think just the fact of who they are, and there's kind of a smoothness to the way they all fit together, and maybe because they're all friends too, in real life. That I don't know. It shouldn't work at all, but it does.
It really does. But this is what I was curious about most in terms of your music, because there is a danger of the music being, like the film, too busy.
Right.
There is that danger. So when you were concocting themes, I mean, you have your villainous theme.
Yeah.
And then, but do you just focus on a major theme for the group themselves, for the Expendables, or do you take individual characters and give them musical voice?
No, I really couldn't. There's just too many characters. So, you have kind of the different themes. There's these kind of motifs that crop up, and then you have, your like riffs type of things, that stuff, and then you have like the really melodic noble theme, that's usually played on a solo horn or maybe strings, and all they're doing is it's saying, this is the Expendables as a group, but can't do each character in particular, so it's kind of a vibe for the group, but whatever the emotion is of what's going on in the scene, I'll have a theme cocked and loaded and ready for, that particular mood. And so I just kind of wrote, I'm trying to even think of how many themes. I'm not sure how many themes, maybe 4 or 5. And then, so whatever is happening on screen, I can go to that. And this made it a lot easier this time around in a way, because since you have such a well-defined villain, and he has his own theme, which is comprised of kind of a motif. There's kind of a little pattern ostinato, and then a melodic theme. And so for any particular mood that's going on with this character, it can kind of, one of those 3 is probably going to probably do the trick.
Right.
And of course, you don't need as much for you never need as much for the dark side as you do the light, because you're not going to have a noble version or a melancholy, sad, nostalgic version of the bad guy theme. It just kind of doesn't make any sense,
Right.
So you end up kind of with slightly less versions of bad guy music, and good guy music is a little bit more. There's going to be more shades. So in that way, I was able to avoid having kind of, 20 million themes and having it be identified. Oh, the Jet Li theme. Oh, the Arnold Schwarzenegger theme. And,
right.
Because in that way also it would be really hard, because again, they're kind of having fun at times, and there's sad moments and all that, and I would almost have to have, a few versions of each character's theme, and it would just be ridiculous.
No, absolutely, and I adore your score for the movie. I'm crazy about everything you do. So my curiosity was, was that a consideration? I mean, which characters deserve their own theme, and how much is too much? So I'm glad you answered that for me. And let me tell you, I'm completely geeking out that you're sitting at your piano and you played some. Cool.
That's right. Yeah, I was cruising around, and I was walking by the piano as he asked the question. I thought,
Oh, that's nice. So tell me, because I didn't ask you this before. I haven't seen the documentary that's for the first film that's included in that DVD Blu-ray.
Oh, sure.
But my understanding of the Expendables and how it started, was it originally conceived more comically?
Yeah, it was. There was kind of it was like, and there's definitely, there's the stamp of its origin in the film now, certainly. But yeah, I think the idea was to be fairly satirical, and I think what the thing that was there was something that was right and wrong about that, I think. The satirical kind of throwback, they wanted like a throwback, real R-rated action movie from the 80s and 90s kind of vibe. And that's fine. Like, that's fun. But then once it kind of started getting going a little bit more, you know, you have these characters and these icons from that era, and you realize, okay, you kind of, to be completely satirical, it somehow, you realize that stuff is too good to be completely satirical. And you see these guys on screen doing their thing from these movies that you love, and you're like, wait a minute, this actually is just going to be a throwback movie that's just cool. You know, like it's almost like we kind of joke about a lot of the movies, you know, from that era, and then you realize that actually no, they're actually really fun and good. You know, Die Hard and all sorts of, you know. So you're looking at these characters, and the fact that they're going to do a send up kind of made sense in the sense that I think where they adjusted correctly is now, especially in the second one, is it's a lot funnier in a self-deprecating way. These characters are now, you know, like Arnold, and as it, you know, he like they're admitting that they're dealing with an age problem, you know, and that's kind of the angle. And also the fact that you have each of them have this incredible vulnerability, and kind of they each have a weakness, you know. Like we talked about Dolph Lundgren's character and how, you know, he's just kind of a mess, and he always strikes out with the women, and then Jason Statham with his girlfriend that keeps texting him and calling him throughout all these crazy battles, and he can't ever, you know, kind of tell her to call back later or anything. You just tell her, like, all this stuff just it kind of adds up to where they're being self-deprecating, but it's not making fun of the very kind of movie that it is.
Right.
And I think it started out that way, and then fortunately, you know, Stallone, he was able to have the foresight to say, kind of, wait, hold on, I think we're maybe going slightly down the wrong road here. It's fun to make fun of ourselves within the movie, but just making fun of those movies is not where it's at. You know?
Well, and I think too, I mean, certainly the films have a tongue-in-cheek element to them, and they're playing off the perception of their personas over the years in a very humorous way. But I think if you played it as a satire, it would definitely take the edge off the intensity of those great action scenes.
Yeah. You would kind of be Hot Shots Part 2, you know, you'd be the one that's the Rambo one. And it's like, yeah, I mean that was hilarious, but that is a pure satire done by, at the time, Charlie Sheen, that was like kind of making fun of Sly a little bit, and that's a send-up. But these are the real guys, you know, and all of a sudden they're shooting the action sequences, and it's like, wait a minute, this is kind of kick-ass, and it's better than simply being a satire. So at the end of the day, I think the fact that Sly, where he was totally right in the first place, was let's inject a bunch of humor into this, because we're just going to make it a fun ride, but it's not at the expense of kind of losing any of the weight of having like a really cool action film.
Yeah. And you know, this is I guess it's the third film is it the third film you've done with Stallone? Rambo, The Expendables, and this
you're right.
One.
Mm-hmm. The third one.
This is just I mean, this has to be a very special, fruitful collaboration. What clicks between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. He's become, you know, a good friend and great artistic collaborator, and we, you know, he knows exactly what he's approaching with the film, whether it be something that, you know, right now, you know, he's doing the action films, but I mean, he's so capable of doing anything. He has all sorts of interests and artists and writers and poets and things like that. Story-wise, you know, I could see him, you know, he's probably going to branch out when in terms of directing, and he's having fun with doing some action films right now, kind of as he says, like, while he can, you know. But he's a really great music director in terms of knowing music and knowing what he likes, and kind of for all of us that want to keep film music and live music with orchestras and all that alive. He's a big proponent of that and never wants to cut corners or anything in terms of where that goes. So he's got such a rich music history with this film. Starting from the beginning.
Well, that's just it.
Yeah.
And I want to know about this pressure. Because if you think of Rocky, if you think of the music of First Blood and Rambo, and even if you think of something that might be akin to the Expendables, like something maybe like a Dirty Dozen or something, you think of these iconic themes, and I don't know that you can you actually set out to write an iconic theme?
No, not really. All I can do is look at the fact that some of the greatest and most memorable scores were in this, not only in this genre, but in films that Stallone himself is associated with thematically, and it's never it never was something where I said, okay, I must do that exact. But it does dawn on you that this is something that has been a part of filmmaking surrounding Stallone and Arnold and all these guys. Terminator, Rocky, Rambo, all these things, and then of course Die Hard, and you usually look at the list of actors that are in the movie, and then you can have some of the most just instantly recognizable music. So it's a bar that's too high to even really aim for. But at the same time, I tried to. What I tried to do with this was come up with. It's funny because it's like the different themes are kind of reflective of the different composers and scores that I grew up loving. Like there's, there's the horn motif is definitely, it's obvious that I'm a big Jerry Goldsmith fan when you listen to the way that's written, and then the kind of more riff-oriented, theme of Expendables definitely has a kind of. I try to make something really, really simplified in the way that the Terminator score did. Just kind of, since there are these different, modes that they're in, I kind of wanted to make each one, and one's more like a Rocky kind of fanfare, and in a way, those scores influenced me just as a kid growing up, and that's what I'd listened to, and so I tried really hard to do a few different things that at least people could walk out of the theater, kind of, they would remember it. And the cool thing is that now that there's two films, is that actually the feedback was that they connected even in testing, they connected the score with that it's associated with the first movie and the second movie, which is crazy to me because it's like wow, people remember? Oh, that's cool. So
no, that's terrific.
At least some people noticed.
No, absolutely. And I'm a major geek about film scores anyway. I've always purchased them and listened to them. That's basically all I listen to. Yeah. But I adore your music for the Expendables because for both of these films, because when I put it on, it elevates me. I feel like conquering a country.
Exactly, or rescuing someone or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and I feel that way about when I hear scores. I was like, wow, it kind of takes you and puts you in that mood. It's like, I always think of for some reason there's moments where I'm listening to scores and I remember them, and I kind of, for some reason, when I'm cruising around, walking around, the moments that I have my iPod on and I've got my headphones on is usually coming off a plane, and when I'm walking, I always remember walking through LAX or LaGuardia or something where it's kind of late at night and I'm getting in a red eye and there's no one there and I'm just walking through and I'll have something on. And I actually still remember what I have on during those moments, whether it's like, I'm walking through in a Shawshank Redemption or whatever, and, I'm just like, or Patton or even like Born Identity or something, and you feel like, I'm full on Spy, or all those things. Like it really, there are things that do exactly what they do in the movie, which is they're supposed to elevate your mood or kind of make you feel a certain way. And if that works, my music does that for anyone. Then I guess that's a bit of mission accomplished.
No, absolutely.
It's always, I've always enjoyed music so much, and it's hard to have any distance on your own music.
I was talking to somebody actually, and they said what they love to do when they're on a plane. They're not supposed to have electronic devices on, but when the plane is landing, they always put on their iPod and play the theme from Crimson Tide. And they say it's like they're living
a good
a
one.
Movie moment. Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that maybe you were going to say is it Elmer Bernstein, the airplane theme.
Oh.
Like the full-on, it's the satire of the disaster music from other movies.
Yeah,
pretty great too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you about just a couple of other films because that we haven't had a chance to talk to before, I think.
Uh-huh.
And we just had Friedkin on our show, and you did Bug for him, and I want to know about the Friedkin experience for you.
Oh, and you did what with Bug for him, or you?
Did you did Bug for him, right?
Oh yes. For some reason I just heard you wrong. Yeah, I did. That was wild. I mean, I did 2 movies with him. I did the score for Bug, and I did the score for The Hunted.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So and The Hunted was a wild one because that was really my first bigger studio film score. And he had seen Frailty, which I had just done, and this was like 10 years ago. And he really loved it. He had no idea who I was, and I mean, I don't think anyone knew who I was. And he just was like, "Wow, this is a dark dude. I gotta meet this guy. This music is tweaked, you know." And and so I met him, like, "Hey," you know. He's like, "Huh." I was really excited, and I was like, "I'm such a big fan," you know. And it was just I remember freaking out going into that meeting, but he was cool. I mean, the guy's, as you know, the guy's a cool cat. You know, he just is. He's kind of intense, you know, and definitely knows his film, and you know, and also really he directs operas in his spare time, so he knows music very well. But so yeah, I did The Hunted, which was a real challenge, and it was a pretty, you know, for me it was an orchestral, slightly avant-garde score, but with action strains in there, but not, you know, it was kind of athematic and by design. And then Bug came along, and I mean, it was like throw out the rule book. That was just such a completely weird score in the sense that it was like a combination of, you know, kind of distant memory music tweaked that's out of tune, and then with all sorts of you know, I did minimalism and repeated patterns and noise kind of used as music, air conditioning units that I would kind of tune, you know, and then play with rhythmic, strange things, and a cello, like I'd loop cello things that I'd play that were all tweaky. It's probably my weirdest, but definitely my most avant-garde score, and kind of a challenge to listen to, and some people love it, and some people, you know, just can't take it.
I love it. I mean, I just rewatched it again for the 3rd or 4th time last week, and that's what I was curious about in terms of scoring it, because that had to have been an example of truly, as a musician, getting into the psyche of those characters in that confined space, and
Michael
trying to give
Shannon's character.
Oh yeah, and giving musical voice to that sense of paranoia and psychosis. And
yeah, it was way. I mean, that music was basically what's rattling around in his head, you know, and that's why sometimes it would kind of be, and there are these really, you know, I remember like tuning shortwave radio, then putting things into like a tape machine, slicing things. It was so messed up. It's a pretty weird listen. And the funny thing is, like, since then I've met a lot of people that are really into it, and like Don Coscarelli really dug that score, and for John Dies at the End, he was listening to it and temping, using that, and it's like, wow, I didn't know this was even like, something that you could use somewhere, except to drive away dinner guests or something. So, and so that was, and so then I did John Dies at the End, which hasn't come out yet, but that is a pretty avant-garde score, but with a sense of humor too. But it's pretty tweaked, and a lot of the score is backwards, like literally, and same with Break, another score that I did recently that is a lot more electronic and claustrophobic, and using glockenspiels and guitars and drums and things, but is just completely out of the box in terms of what the scores that I'm known for really are, which is kind of that big orchestral action thing.
Right.
So it's fun to jump around, and it kind of, if it wasn't for Friedkin in a way, I definitely wouldn't have made this journey. He kind of pulled me from just doing indies alone into doing studio films, and since then, because I came from indies, I've always wanted to do one or two a year. I'd try to fit it in, just like I'd find something that I could do that's just interesting musically, regardless if it ever would get an audience. I just kind of need that creatively to do that a few times a year and get that kind of out of my system.
Does it feel like kind of a palate cleanser in a way when you go? Yeah.
Definitely. And it's funny because sometimes people they won't realize that I've done, like this last year, John Dies at the End, which hasn't come out, Standing Up, DJ Caruso's new movie, which was called Goat Island, but it's called Standing Up, and it's a coming of age tale, kind of like along the lines of a Stand By Me, beautiful story set in 1984 about these two 12-year-old kids. Total palate cleanser on that. Break, which is a guy, that gets locked in the trunk of a car, completely disturbing. That was fun. John Dies at the End, which is Coscarelli. I scored Bubba Hotep with him about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's a Paul Giamatti movie with it's all about this drug called soy sauce that people take, and it stops time and does all this weird messed up stuff to you and kind of kills you in reverse and all these pretty strange. It's a really, really weird movie, but a lot of fun, and twisted. And so like these are interspersed, but I think people go, oh, well, you did Los Angeles and Fast Five and Eagle Eye and Expendables, and that's all good and well, but it's fun to do these other things.
Absolutely.
Columbus Circle is another one over the last year or so, which is a complete, it's like a chamber group with marimbas and strings, closer to like a Henry Mancini, like charade type of score, And those palate cleansers, as you say, kind of really keep you creatively interested in just changing it up.
You're in a good place. Hearing you talk about all the recent credits, I mean, you've been in a good place for a long time, but this is really exciting time for you. You're doing a lot of different stuff. Yeah,
it is. There's nothing better than being able to kind of go in there and have an excuse to tackle a different kind of music, and it's almost like doing a new album, and I always look towards people like like these groups, artists and songwriters and bands, and through the years that have done things that are surprising, like, wow, can you believe that that group did that? And you think of like the most obvious example being something like the Beatles, going from at one point, 8 days a week, and that She Loves You to, all of a sudden they put out Revolver, and the last track's Tomorrow Never Knows, and it's like, what the, and which led to such powerful, Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper's and all that, and so for me, it's like, I get an excuse to kind of jump into these other genres, and if I can do that a few times a year, I mean, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask because I saw earlier today. I saw that you were credited for doing some work on Unstoppable. Did you do work on Unstoppable? In
fact, it's interesting that you noticed that. Yeah, this because Tony, passed away, and it's so sad. And my contact with him was on Unstoppable, and it was. I mean, I've been a fan of his, forever, since I was a kid, and when it came to that, I don't remember the circumstances exactly, but there's like some scenes in there, a big chunk of some, I don't know, I think it was like the action sequence at the end and all that, where they wanted to use my music, some music that I'd already written, actually. So that ended up happening, and it worked great, and it worked really well with Harry's music, and it just kind of was a cool thing, a big honor, too, to just be in a Tony Scott film, and it was, so then, it's strange, those things, and then you all of a sudden you get a phone call in the morning, like, hey, did you hear? And
did you have a chance to meet him ever?
Yeah, he's awesome, just an intense guy, friendly guy, funny guy, like old school, real director, super talented. And
very much, yeah. We're paying tribute to his films. We're paying tribute to his films tonight, actually, and thinking about the music that accompanied his films. I mean, I think just in terms of the modern action film as we know it today, he had a major role in defining it.
Yeah.
But also musically, I mean, the musical voice to the action genre. He had a major role in that as well, I think.
Huge. Totally not to be underestimated, and I mean, and it started off very interestingly too. I think it was The Hunger was first, right? Or
yes.
And then to go into doing things like obviously Top Gun, and then moving into the whole milieu that he, all the films he worked on with Harry and Hans and it's such a defines kind of the modern action vibe, and he was so good at kind of, I think, encouraging composers to do a certain something, that always seemed to capture the vibe of the movie, and it's funny because it is so true that you associate this type of music and the sound with his movies, but at the same time, the guy was pegged early on, just like his brother, as being a pure visual guy, coming from cinematography and coming from doing, commercials and things like that the knock on him was that it was so, the stuff was so pretty that he shot. It just looked unbelievably cool, but it really lent itself to great music because these visuals opened up enough space that it wasn't just, it opened enough space that it wasn't just explosions. This stuff it almost looked like, it kind of fooled you into thinking, wow, this is like this eye candy special effects film. When you look at it, it was just the way he'd pick his lens and light a scene, and that was his greatest special effect, was his eye. And so, you were able to do music without tons of sound effects going on all the time. I mean, there were those scenes, of course, but and so you had those moments where you could you all of a sudden hear and it's like these shots, these long shots, these long lens shots with the beautiful amber, sunny hue, and it left room for really cool music and
absolutely.
An indelible mark.
It's so iconic, and I think about. I mean, you do think about big action films and Tony Scott, but you think you look at Crimson Tide, and you think of that as a big action film, but it's two great actors in a submarine going.
Submarine, I know.
The Unstoppable, two guys on a train.
Yeah,
incredible.
Same guy, Denzel and both. Yeah, I mean, and the score is so cool for Crimson Tide, and. That kind of, in a way, was a turning point also, like what we know as kind of this era of, motif-driven scores with that kind of sound. It was kind of the one that popularized it, to me, at least.
I think so,
with
too.
Crimson Tide.
Yeah.
And then all the way through, it's like Deja Vu, just and all, with kind of refining it through the years, and again, he kind of always worked on his craft. It was just, the guy was, he was something else.